This is an incredibly terrifying Taiwanese horror movie, deeply rooted in true folklore. It's like the school version of Kettle Hill and stands as one of the darkest films I've ever witnessed. By the time it ends, you can't even begin to fathom the horrors of the human race. There's a rumor about an old folks' home in Taipei, where an extremely frightening creature exists. Despite their human appearance, they possess sharp, guttering teeth and are known to hunt during the late-night hours, living solely on human flesh. They would hunt in the dead of night, surviving on human flesh and blood. If someone was seen by them, there was only one possible outcome: they would be skinned and sucked to death. This is precisely why the entire old folks' home radiated an aura of terror, yet very few people were aware of their existence. A senior high school student named Y came here with 3 other thugs by accident, and what awaited them was a dreadful fate. This all began not too long ago. Way's top grades all year round were deliberately targeted by all the students in the class. They called Way up to the stage and threw paper balls at him like crazy, and even the gangsters in the class kept teasing him with all sorts of unimaginable mean words. Way resisted his resentment and turned his head to look at the teacher, wanting to ask him to intercede on his behalf, but the teacher, who was witnessing the whole thing, swept him away with a poisonous gaze.
Why look at me?
It turned out that the reason why Wei became the object of ridicule was that he was suspected of stealing it because the class fee had disappeared. No matter how he tried to explain it, the students turned a deaf ear to him, and even the teacher didn't want to believe him at all. Meanwhile, it was also because of this incident that Wei was being more and more ostracized by the class. With Dejan's constant coaxing, the Noodles classroom was filled with all sorts of unpleasant insults, and as he listened to the teasing voices of his classmates, and watched Dejan's ugly face, he instantly decided that he must have stolen it. He knew that he must have stolen the class fee and planted it on him, so he followed him after school and asked him why he planted it on him, but instead of answering, Dejan took the stolen money and smashed him in the face, and finally dragged him down to the ground and strangled him with a rope around his neck, and even took a sharp needle and jabbed it into his eye. If he moved one more time, he could lose his eye at any moment. In the face of such insults, Wei appeared to give in, but Bertoli secretly recorded it and took it to the office in an attempt to get a teacher to help her teach Big John a lesson. But as a teacher, she not only didn't help, but also made an outrageous remark.
Lin Shu-wei. School life isn't just about studying, it's also about forming relationships. I understand it's challenging, but have you ever thought about why it's you and not someone else?
The teacher believed Y was so outgoing that he ended up being ostracized, so she decided to send him along with 3 other troublesome students to a nursing home to help them bond. They were unaware that there were rumors about the place being haunted by monsters. They pushed an elderly man around in his wheelchair, touched him inappropriately, and took pictures of their actions. Their cruel behavior almost led to the old man's death, and Y participated to avoid being bullied himself. Yet, just tormenting the elderly man wasn't enough for them. They also wanted to steal. They went into a veteran's room, searched around, and discovered a locked box, thinking it might contain treasures. When the girl's foot touched the sunlight, she felt thrilled and decided to sneak away with the box during the night. As they were walking back, they heard a peculiar noise. A few individuals picked up flashlights and were absolutely shocked by what they saw. 2 strange girls were gnawing on the old man's body, and the girl, upon hearing the noise, became terrified and ran away. Seeing this, they ignored the baby and ran for their lives towards the building. At the door, they found a girl hit by a car and were terrified. Unsure about calling the police, the girl suddenly jumped up, trying to suck blood. Daebong hit her with a hammer, saving her. At the crucial moment, the strong man knocked her out to save his friend. To hide her from the police, they took her to an old warehouse. Soon, the girl woke up, seemingly controlled by a force, and stood up, turning her head 180 degrees, scaring them. When her foot touched the sunlight, she was instantly killed. This strange sight also attracted the attention of the 4 men, who thought the girl was afraid of light, and immediately found a mirror to reflect the sunlight on her face, which instantly burned the girl, and she struggled and climbed down from the wall, and then hid herself in a box. But Dejong, who was beside her, did not intend to let go of the girl, and the evil in her heart was intensified with the girl's cries to such an extent that, in the last resort, she tied her to a pillar and tortured her by every inhuman means possible. Then, she was tied to a stone pillar and tortured by all sorts of inhuman means. Then, some men got a tomato and burnt it red with a musket. Then, 2 other men held her mouth and pushed the tomato in, loudly pulling out her teeth. The girl's eyes were tearing from the pain, but they laughed at the same time. In order to prevent the girl from breaking free and eating herself, they sealed her mouth with an iron plate. The cruelty of this is 10 times more horrible than that of the evil demon. The girl was well educated, but neither the teachings of the town nor the Bible had any real impact on her, except that her blood burned fiercely like dowels under the bright sunlight. No one knew she had a sister. When her sister disappeared, she searched everywhere at home but only discovered the old soldier's room. This soldier, who had fought against the Japanese with strength surpassing that of ordinary men, faced monstrous creatures on the wall. He wielded a massive 3-meter sword, striking her off the balcony, yet she survived, got up, and continued her search for her sister. Unbeknownst to her, her sister was tied to a post, being tortured by cruel thugs. Only Vi saw her own past self reflected in the girl and realized that if she hadn't made mistakes, she might have ended up tied to that post. Wei wanted to help the girls, so when he got home, he started searching for missing persons in recent years, and finally found the girl's information. However, Wei never imagined that these 2 seemingly beautiful and kind-hearted girls had a pair of headfellers who had been practicing on them for many years, causing them to become unscrupulous and unruly, and as more and more headfellings were cast on them, they were both eaten up by the demons, and the 2 of them became blood-sucking ghosts, living on human flesh. Later, when Dejong clashed with a classmate, the teacher called him over and gave him a lecture. Then he slapped Dejong on the face, and it was that slap that really aroused Dejong's anger. But this was a school, and he couldn't dare to hit a teacher openly, so she vented her anger on the girl, and then the stick went down, and she let out a horrible scream, and her mouth was covered in tears, and she was so angry that she couldn't stand it, and she couldn't stand it. The moment the blood touched the sunlight, it lit up a fire. Looking at the scene in front of him, a more sinister thought crept into Dejong's mind. When the teacher was not around, he sneaked into the office and finally opened the teacher's plastic cup, took a bottle of black blood out of his pocket, and added all of it in one go. The teacher drank the girl's blood, and instantly became weaker and weaker, suffering from abdominal pains and abdominal pain. In the next moment, a huge pool of black blood flowed out from under the teacher's abdomen. The middle-aged man, Dejong, was shocked. Dejong immediately went over to the teacher and took her to the healthcare center, pretending to be kind, and he even deliberately stepped out into the sunlight. "Teacher, Amit Babuda, I know you." Immediately after, the teacher's face started to smoke, and her body instantly caught fire. Thirsty to see what was happening in front of him, the students around him calmly grabbed their cell phones to take pictures, and Dejong took a picture. So he rushed over to hide in the small dark room, but laughed in amazement and watched as the teacher was burned to ashes. As the story fermented, it soon made the news. The sister, who was enjoying her dinner, also noticed the teacher's strange behavior, and decided that the high school students had robbed her sister. So in order to avenge the death of her sister, he immediately stopped a school bus and slaughtered all the people on board, including Dejong's girlfriend. Upon learning of this, Big Strong was overwhelmed with grief. He came to the girl in a rage and not only pulled out all his teeth, but also emptied his shoes, leaving him with only one last breath of air to deal with Sis. They decided to use Sis's shoes to lure her to the small dark room, and then seal the iron door before finally burning the 2 of them alive with gasoline, and naturally, it was the most bullying person, Y, who was responsible for sealing the door. Listening to her screams, he knew very well that he was only the target of the public's exploitation, that he had done all the bad things, yet he could bring his little brother along, and that he, who was so good, had to be eaten up by Sis. Thinking of this, the good man, Y, could not help but think an evil thought, that he wanted to let these bastards know what would happen if they messed with an honest man. Soon, as the evening drew near, Sis searched for her blood and found the little black house, where the aliens were hiding, and waited for Sis to take advantage of them. But while everyone was holding their breath, Wei suddenly dialed Fatty's number, and when she heard Tokyo, she smelled the prey, and Fatty, who was hiding in the iron bucket, was inevitably torn to pieces. Fatty's screams echoed across the sky, startling the rest of the group, and Strong couldn't believe that Wei was going to turn against him, and that this was a game of death by play. However, Wei had already made a head start and blocked the door with his body, refusing to budge no matter how much Dejong pleaded with him to open it. But soon, there was a sound of tearing outside the door, and Dejan gradually lost his movement. It became clear that he was being devoured by Sis. In desperation, she rushed to her sister, pleading with her to stop the killing, but her limbs were bound tightly with chains, rendering her unable to move, let alone intervene. Wer could only run and plead for mercy, but with just a single glance, she lifted him off his feet, and he realized he was about to be eaten by her. Wer had no choice but to open the window and let the sunlight pour in. However, that ray of sunshine fell directly on his sister, causing her such intense agony that the pain was absolutely unbearable. Even though she was aware she would be burnt to death by the sun, she still hurried to her sister and shielded her from its rays. However, as the sun expanded more and more, the two of them were eventually reduced to ashes. After this tragic event, although Y was the sole survivor, the bullying against him persisted. Now that the world had turned into black and white, with no place for the good-hearted, but only for the wicked and evil, he felt such disgust towards the world and an even stronger hatred towards the bullies. He decided to pour his last bottle of black shoe polish into the school lunch. At the start of the meal, he even consumed his own portion, because he realized that by contaminating his classmates' lunches, he had lost his former goodness. He had become a criminal, no longer a good person, and he could never be good enough for the world again. I don't know. So, he could only choose to be slightly honored with the whole class. Okay, that's all for today's story. I'm Yasser Arafat. We'll see you next time.